on today's StoryBeat.
I think it's really simple. I think the people who have done okay in this business are people who are persistent despite the desperate struggles. I mean, I've never had a film that didn't have a very dark moment where I really wanted out and I hated the subject, I hated the film, I hated my edit, I hated the idea. Somehow the idea that, well, just keep going, we'll figure it out. So somehow this idea of just persistence, of just not really ever giving up, I really think is one of the things I did. I just kind of never quite gave up, even though I wanted to. I definitely wanted to.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Doug Prey, is a documentary filmmaker of great range and substance. His portraits of subcultures and creative visionaries have led him to numerous Sundance premieres, critical raves, and awards. His feature documentaries include Love Lizzo, Surfwise, and the Emmy Award-winning Art and Copy. His first two films, Hype, the story of the Seattle music scene, and Scratch, about DJs and the birth of hip-hop, are often ranked among the best music docs of all time. Doug won a Grammy and 5 Emmy nominations as executive producer, writer, and editor of HBO's The Defiant Ones. He executive produced From Cradle to Stage with Dave Grohl and the AppleTV Plus series Home. This year, 2024, Turner Classic Movies and Max debuted The Power of Film, a 6-part series with Professor Howard Suber, for which Doug was executive producer, supervising editor, and writer. Doug has also directed dozens of commissioned short films and nonfiction commercials, including an HIV/AIDS awareness campaign, which won him his first Emmy. For the record, Doug and I know one another from The Power of Film, as I became involved in this extraordinary project as a co-executive producer. Like Doug, I'm a UCLA MFA graduate and one of Howard Suber's former students. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm truly delighted to have the gifted, multi-award-winning documentarian Doug Prey join me today. Doug, welcome to StoryBeat.
Hi, Steve, and thank you so much. It's an honor to be on your show.
It's a great privilege for me to have you. Trust me on that. So let's go back in time a little bit. What were your earliest inspirations and influences? What was your first creative love, and how did you get into this thing, making documentaries?
You know, I always listen to other people's bios and they always say, well, my mom took me to the matinee every Sunday or something. I am so not that. I didn't watch movies hardly at all as a child. I remember maybe 3 my entire childhood. The Wizard of Oz, of course, Planet of the Apes, Let It Be,
Yes.
2001: A Space Odyssey, which also gives you an idea of my age. However, I wasn't really that into movies. I was into sort of everything else. I came from a very musical family. My mom was a choir director and a music teacher and a piano teacher. So I grew up all around music. She was also a painter and a photographer. So she was highly creative and had a big influence on me. So I loved the arts. I could do it. I could see it. My dad was a scientist, and so I don't know how that fits into filmmaking, but it did. I ended up making films that I think sometimes try to honor the sciences, but mostly I understood the science of making films. Mostly, and I don't think I'm alone in saying this, but I was kind of in high school and in college a jack of all trades. I could sort of do everything. I was one of those guys who could pick up the guitar and play it pretty well, but I didn't really want to have a band. I mean, I was in a band, but you know what I mean? I didn't think that was my career. I could paint, but I wasn't going to really become a painter. I could make music. I could do these other things. I could write, but I really didn't see myself as a writer. Directing directing films just brought it all together. It was sort of like, oh, ah,
Because it's all of in there.
exactly.
Directing is all about art and vision and sound and all the rest of it.
It all made sense once I kind of went, wait a minute, film combines all the arts. I want to make film. So when I was, older, I was an undergrad, but they didn't have any classes at my college in film. But I took a little film class and I kind of got into it, and then just kept being interested in making short films. They were terrible, of course, all my first short films, but I was just experimenting and making a lot of little films, and eventually ended up my first real job out of college. Well, there's some stupid jobs I had, but the first real job,
We all have those.
yeah, I'm hesitating whether I should even tell you about my first stupid job. It was in the entertainment industry. I was installing cable TV cables into Denver suburban homes.
Well, it's showbiz.
It's so yeah. It was, I can say I worked from the ground up, right? Anyway, but I worked in San Francisco in 1984. I worked for a company named Woody Clark Productions.
Hmm.
And Woody was a documentary film producer. And the craziest thing is that he actually sold movies to businesses all across the country that were on highly relevant, socially relevant topics for which those companies might get sued if they didn't educate themselves. And by that, I mean, very specifically, sexual harassment in the workplace
Oh.
was a brand new idea. I mean, of course, it had been going on for 20,000 years, but it was a new idea. And I don't mean to make light of it. It was a very serious new idea that, hey, wait a minute, this is wrong. And our bosses could get sued for this. And we need to educate ourselves quickly and stop this behavior, which is how it's kind of supposed to work. And Woody Clark made this half-hour documentary called The Workplace Hustle, starring Ed Asner as the host.
Oh.
Documentary with some reenactments, really dated, creepy reenactments now when you watch it today. But it was a very powerful film, and every company in the country needed that film. And I was the shipping guy. And I sat there shipping out these prints, 16 millimeter prints to every company in the country. And my only thought was socially relevant documentaries make money.
Yes, of course.
Why are you laughing, Steve?
I've taught for the last 14 years here in Pittsburgh, and every year they make you go through one of those training courses, or several of them actually, sexual harassment, and
Yeah.
various things about the legalities of what you can and can't do and say, HIPAA, and all those things. So,
Yeah,
those are very important and do make money if that's what you want to do.
exactly. Exactly.
But if you want to do something that's a little more entertaining, perhaps not.
It's true. I mean, and of course I'm laughing. And I tell that story as a joke because it's just such a, well, docs are like, A, you never make money on docs. B, socially relevant docs, especially very, very hard. But but it also gave me a window into the power of film, not to no pun intended with the new series.
And we'll get there, by the way. We'll talk about the power of film.
Yeah, I actually, it's funny. I just said that because I really meant it showed me the impact of film when it is well done. And it was a good film. It really was a good documentary. It was highly relevant and it was powerful. It really educated a lot of people. And then he later made a film about age discrimination in the workplace. And I eventually moved on, but it kind of gave me a foothold, and that's how I ended up being able to get into UCLA, into the producers program. And so that's kind of how it all got started.
Did you go to UCLA intending to make documentaries, or did you go intending to make narrative films?
Narrative,
Narrative.
100%. I
Hmm.
mean, I had worked for a documentary filmmaker, so I had a sensitivity to it. I mean, meaning I liked it. I liked documentaries and I thought they were great, but I never once thought, oh, I'm going to make documentaries. I went to UCLA thinking, no, I want to be the next Francis Ford Coppola. I want to
Sure.
write screenplays, work with actors, and moving to Hollywood. It was all very exciting to me. And I did not take one documentary class at UCLA in 4 years.
Really?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Were the little films that you were making when you were much younger, were those narratives?
They were so weird, Steve, that I don't know what they were. They were abstract, strange little 16 millimeter films shot on a Bolex, silent. And it was only after working at this place in San Francisco, and I really do owe it to Woody Clark. He really got my career going, that I started kind of working with bigger projects, and I eventually got to be an associate producer on one and started helping edit another. And I got some really good experiences there. But no, my short film it was actually through I knew some bands up in Seattle, not the famous bands you may be thinking of when I say that, but bands who were good friends of mine out of college. And I did a couple music videos, and that kind of was so I was into making music videos. I was, stuff on the side like that. Otherwise, in film school, I just was making narrative things, and I was in the producers program, so I was studying producing.
And music videos can be quite abstract and don't have to be particularly following a narrative structure,
That's right.
correct?
That's right. And being a musician, it all made sense to me. Like, oh, that's how I learned sort of editing and the rhythm and the idea of editing rhythmically, came from that.
Well, you would, as a musician, understand all that rhythm, timing, how to do something on a beat, all those kinds of things.
Mhm.
When you were at UCLA, were you actually making, as a producer, were you making movies there
Well, only as a class assignments.
as a class assignment?
Yeah,
Sure.
no different than yes, I wrote a screenplay. It was terrible, but yeah, I made, I did all the things you would expect to do as assignments, but yeah, I made one film outside of there, but like a 20-minute film about a car salesman. But it wasn't a doc. It was a script.
Sorry, so you come out of UCLA, and what do you start to do? How did you eventually find your way into making, making docs and people know you for that?
Well, since you and I both have UCLA MFA in common,
Yes.
even though we didn't know each other at all at the time, I got out and like a lot of I'm going to go ahead and say arrogant graduates. I kind of figured like, okay, I'm going to write the next great American screenplay, or I'm going to do this or that, or I'll get hired to direct. It doesn't really work that way.
No.
The interesting thing about film, as you well know, is that it's the only things that happen are what you make happen. Even, and it's really that really hit me. So I think I had a pretty hard year right after getting out of UCLA, thinking like, oh my God, it's one of the best film schools. I'm so proud. I'm so, I got all this education. Now let's do it. And I really couldn't figure out how to do that. And so it was at the same time that a fellow student friend of mine, Steve Helvey, who was in also in Howard Suber's producers program, at UCLA had the idea that because I'd done those couple music videos, why wouldn't we go up to Seattle and make the ultimate, the definitive Seattle music scene movie,
Hmm.
the story of the Seattle music scene? Because at that exact moment, which is 1992, the entire world was feasting on Seattle and going, oh my God, this is the coolest music scene on the planet. It's like Liverpool. It's like, it's like Detroit. It's like Motown. It's like, that's what it was like. And so Steve eventually, after many months, and I really thought it was a terrible idea, convinced me to get involved in my first movie. And that's sort of the beginning of the end. Well, not the end, but that's how I got, and then I started really going, okay, we're going to make a doc. I'm going to make a documentary. This makes sense.
Did you figure that it would turn into narrative movie making, or did you think once you went down that road, yeah, this is good, I'll keep doing this?
It was only after the name of that movie is Hype. And it took Steve and I at least 4 years, maybe five to make it,
Wow.
which it is not uncommon for a first film, a first totally independent film. We had to raise the money. We had to do all the stuff. And, I can feel sorry for myself, but so many filmmakers say, oh my God, that first film, that was the one that, you pay your dues on. And we were lucky enough that it got into Sundance in 1996 and it was recognized. It's not like I made millions or really, frankly, even any money, but it got out there. It really got out there. It got reviewed. It played in a number of theaters coast to coast. And it was something that kicked off my career. And once you're known as a music documentarian, well, the next jobs you might get, or the next producers who approach you, if they happen to like that movie, are going to approach you about another music doc. And that's
Hmm.
exactly what happened. I got involved in my second film then.
It's true for so much in the entertainment industry where I'm going to use a term, I don't mean it too negatively, but you get pigeonholed. That's what people see you as. So they come to you if you do a comedy, people think that you're a comedy filmmaker. If you do a drama, people think you make drama movies, but you may be able to do all of it, but they don't see you that way because you're stuck in that little niche. And that happened for you.
Yes, and it's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that
Sure.
they're like, oh, he's really good at that. And I go, oh, I'm getting work. Or I have a reputation. I made a second film and that kind of keeps going. The curse, of course, and is simply that we don't think of ourselves. I say we, any creative thinks like, oh, well, they could do that. Like if you ask me, can I do animation? Well, I've never done animation in my whole life. Maybe I did one assignment once in a class, for like 10 seconds. But honestly, I would go like, oh, of course. But a real animator would look at me and go like, dude, you don't know anything about animation. Like, no.
Well, you, like me, grew up thinking you could do a little bit of everything. You were a jack of all trades. I was a jack of all trades, and I totally get that. You could do anything, and you have many skills and skill sets. You're not a master of any of them in the beginning,
Mhm.
but you have the ability to do all these different things. You're not awful at it, but you're also not brilliant at it yet.
That's exactly true. That is exactly how it happens. But then if you keep making docs, because I just kept doing it, and I had little kids, my wife and I had two little kids, and I had to support the family. And what, in fairness, she supported the family very much so during my starving artist days. But there was a point when all of a sudden I was like, hey, I think I can make money continuing to do docs and to do,
Mhm.
commercial type work that is nonfiction and documentary style. And it's sort of, things sort of shifted. To be blunt, I got better at it. I really did get better at it. Like the more it's no mystery there. The more work you do in a particular area, the more experienced you get, the more your skills improve. I got to be a better editor. I got to be a better interviewer. I got to be a better, kind of structure person, like looking at a doc and saying, "Oh, I know what's wrong with this," and I just kept doing it for decades. I really never went back to doing dramatic work. I've done a lot of different things in the nonfiction realm. I've done almost everything you can do in the nonfiction realm, and I've done very little in the realm of, I working with actors and script.
So Hype was clearly a very good first movie. You got a lot of attention and people thought you were good enough to ask you to do other things. So it was a very good first film. Did you think you were good at it at that point?
I thought I was partly lucky, but it also, I told you that when I got out of film school, I kind of felt like I could make a film.
Hmm.
And I didn't mean that in a way that was putting down my education. I loved UCLA Film School at the time.
Me
I
too.
really did. And I did learn a lot. And I guess one of the things that, graduate school can give somebody, and it's not for everyone, but can give someone like me, is that confidence of like, no, I can make a film. I just don't have the right project yet. And I didn't know hype was the right thing. It almost felt like, oh, okay, I'll do this just to waylay, I need to do something. And I'm really starting to get a little bit depressed because I'm not working on anything interesting. And so, yeah, okay, we'll do, it was almost, I'm not kidding, it was almost begrudging. Like, okay, we'll do this Seattle thing, but I think it's going to be really hard. And I don't think it's the right idea, Steve. And I really, really liked Steve and still do, but it was just kind of like,
Well, you spent 4 years on it before you got to where you were trying to
yeah.
get.
And yeah, it took that long.
So was there a point along the road here over the decades of doing this where you finally think to yourself, yeah, I am good at this. I do know what I'm doing. I am perhaps a master at making these things. Was there a point?
I think so. And I think that point, not to sound like a sellout, but honestly, it was when I began getting paid commercially to do the thing I do in documentaries.
Sure, that makes sense.
Because it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone listening, but if it is, believe me, documentaries don't make a lot of money, and they still
Mm-mm-mm.
don't today, because most of them are independent, most of them are self-made, unless you're like with, Netflix and they're giving you a bunch of money and here we're doing this three-part series or something like that. That's different. But most docs are independent by definition. Because you can start out so inexpensively. You just start.
Well, there's no doc studio. There's no studio other than you say like HBO, perhaps.
That's
You
right.
can't go to Warner Brothers or to Universal Studios or Fox and say, "Hey, where's the documentary department?" They don't have them.
That's a really good point. Yeah, well, we don't need a studio building it either. It's so interesting. And so it was really, I'd say it was after my second feature, and I'd done some other little work in between and some other nonfiction type work. But this is my second feature was a good 5 years after my first.
Hmm.
I'm talking 10 years out after film school. I finally was offered an opportunity, a crazy opportunity from the Hughes brothers to help them direct a commercial. There's a crazy moment when Albert Hughes called me in 2002. I'll never forget it. I was out in the Midwest with the family, and he called. He said, "Doug, man, we need help. We're doing these two different ads for Adidas, and we're in a little bit over our head. Like we could do both, but we're trying to do them both at the same time. It's just too much. We're going crazy. Our producer's going crazy." He said, "Man, why don't you get somebody to come in and direct this other more nonfiction style Adidas ad?" I told him no. I was like, "Albert, man, I'm never going to do a commercial. I can't do that. I just, no, that's just not me. I can't."
Why?
I think I thought it was a sellout, and I was just like, "I can't do this." I don't know. I just was seemed so foreign. I was like, "I'm never going to do you mean a TV commercial? I'm never going to do that." Albert was like, "Doug, you're out of your mind. Do you know, you're going to get paid?" I was like, "Oh, I appreciate that." I literally told him no. And I think he either called back like an hour later or I called him back an hour later. I was like, "Look, I'm sorry. I'm taking myself way too seriously. Like, tell me more about it." Because what really got me was if I can help you guys out, then I will. I'd love to help you guys out. And because I had worked with the Hughes brothers, Albert and Alan Hughes,
Hmm.
I had edited a documentary for them at this point. So I had made Hype and I'd edited that doc and I'd done another feature doc. And I just was like, I can't let these guys down. They actually really need help. And it was the perfect way to get me. And so I said yes within an hour, I'm sure. But it was like, next thing I knew, I was on a plane and I was directing a massive commercial. I mean, like I got out of the car and then somebody ran up to me. It was like 5 in the morning out in the valley, and it was dark out, and there was all these scenes we had to film, even though they were kind of nonfiction style. They were like real people casting, but we're setting up like a basketball game because it's an Adidas thing. And I'd done some prep, of course. I didn't just show up and having no idea what was going on. I'd had a couple days of phone calls with this frantic producer, right? I get out of the car and some like kid runs up to me and he goes like, "Mr. Prey, what kind of coffee would you like?" And I'm like looking at my like shitty little Honda Accord and like looking around going, "Who's he talking to?" Like, I'm not kidding. Like it was one of those moments in my life where I was like, "Oh wow. I'm the director. I'm the director today." And it was great. It was a fantastic experience.
They gave you a script. It wasn't like you had to come up with the idea, right?
That's right. They were sort of, they had started the thing. So all the scenes, a lot of the scenes had been kind of planned out and some of the pre-casting had been done, but they really did need me to come in and take over and make this happen. They hadn't directed any scenes yet. Production hadn't started, but all the pre-pro, all the development is sort of was in place. So it was like a crash course to get me up to speed on how this works. How are we going to shoot this? Who's the cinematographer? I'd never worked with them before. I don't tell that story, as a way of making it sound like, "Oh yeah, I'd arrived and I was the man." Quite the opposite. It was shocking and stunning to feel like a director and to be able to walk onto because it was a set, that day, and have like just a top flight crew. And they were like, "Hey, do you want this light to come in, from these upper windows like this way or that way?" And for me to realize like, I'm a director. All they want is a decision, and all I need is a reason. Okay, I like the light this way. Because that's all directors do. That's all directors do is make a decision. It's binary. It's like either do you want the red curtain or the purple curtain? I think the purple. Why? Because the character feels more purple to me, or whatever, like
But you're making it sound a little easier than it is because all the decisions have to go through you
that's right.
and all the roads lead through you.
Yes, it's true. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is just this idea that there was this feeling of this is really exciting. I'm being paid and paid good money because it was a commercial. I'm being paid as a director and I'm being respected as a director. And I'm being able to direct a large crew as a director, as opposed to the 10 years of crawling around on my, with a little camera, like just, what we used to call the doc ghetto, which was literally like, okay, you're not being paid. Is this a freebie? Yeah, it's a freebie. Is this a favor? Yeah, it's a favor. But would you do it? Sure. Like just dozens of things like that over the years of just like helping out friends and doing my own docs and asking for favors and just the world of making independent films with no money.
Exactly. It's just very challenging. It's challenging even if you have a lot of money, there are challenges to that too. And I think that it's likely that even on the biggest budgeted movies, the directors always feel like they don't have enough.
I think it's probably true.
I think it's probably true. So when you're deciding, I want to make a movie, how do you figure out what subject to do? Is it because people come to you or you develop ideas? Where do your films come from? Is it all directions?
Well, this is partly why I couldn't write a screenplay. Not that I couldn't. I'd still like to say that I will someday, but I'm not very good at inventing things. I'm really not. I'm a problem solver. Like I'm seeing books on your shelf behind you.
Mhm.
If you just handed me any three random books and said, I don't know what this is going to be, but you got to make a story out of these three books. I'd be like, oh, that's cool. Sure. I'd love to do that. And I would love to get my brain going on how to do that. Like makes no sense. I love limits. And documentaries are all about limits. Like, well, we don't have that footage. Well, how can we say this in another way? Well, I don't have that quote. Well, how can you make that speak in another way? And all the way up to the largest, decisions on a documentary of like, how do we even make this? We don't have access or we don't have this. And I like those kind of problems. There's just something about problem solving that turns me on.
Mhm.
And I really mean this. I'm not being trying to be too self-deprecating. I really am not very good at just inventing. Like I always joke with people like who are my friends who are screenwriters. I'm like, how do you decide like fade in Wednesday morning, it's sunny. I'm like, that would take me days to get off that opening line. I'd be like, well, why not Thursday? Why isn't it raining? Oh, wait, it's like, I can't like how do you pick up a character?
So I've been teaching for years Aristotle and the Poetics. And he says, and I'm paraphrasing it, of course, but he says this very simple thing. Your story needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. Wow, that sounds simple until you sit down to try to figure out where is the beginning and how does it end. And then you run into the dilemma of all great storytellers, which is, I don't know where this begins and I don't know where it ends. And if you do know it, you're halfway home. That's what you're talking about. You don't want to be inventive about things. You'd rather shoot some form of reality. Yes?
But it goes back to your first question, which is how do I come up with the ideas?
Mm-hmm.
I never have. I really never have. When the sky's the limit, well, like when people will ask me occasionally, say, okay, imagine you have like 2 million bucks. You can make any doc in the world, or even 500,000. You can make any doc in the world on any subject. What are you going to do? I'm telling you, Steve, I'm just lost because I read articles and I get excited, go, oh, that'd be a cool doc. I mean, I do have those thoughts. There's all sorts of thoughts I have of that could be a great doc, but it's never enough to like make me go, oh, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna go circle the wagons and get the rights to that book and do. It's more. It's always been people approaching me and saying, hey, I liked your last film, or I like this one film you made. We're trying to do this. What do you think? We have this doc. And it's so much better for me to engage with something that's kind of has an idea already and might have that key thing, which is access.
That's the tricky part, isn't it?
Yeah, for all docs. I mean, that's the key word for making a documentary. Access. What is your access? And so if somebody has access to something that's really interesting, or maybe an untold story or a underappreciated subculture, or you name it, anything, then I can start getting interested. I can start thinking like, oh, this story has not really been told. Their story hasn't been told. And suddenly it feels like a job and a problem solving Like it's the problem I need to solve is that this group of musicians or this artist or this, you know, whatever person in business or whoever it is, they feel misunderstood. And that's the problem that I like trying to solve. Is I'm like, oh, I understand you. I get this. I think I understand why you do this, and it's just, that's exciting.
So you like to find or have stories come to you
Yes.
that present an issue that you recognize as requiring a lot of figuring out.
I think so. It doesn't mean that I like complicated stories. I always want to kind of know, well, what's this really about? But I definitely, for whatever reason, and maybe those are the reasons, and maybe there's other reasons, I've just never really generated any of the docs I've done. And I've now done a lot of docs.
Do you think that your docs follow a narrative structure, a typical seven plot point structure?
I've never thought of it as seven plot points, usually a three-act structure, but I don't necessarily believe in that either. But it's just the answer is yes. They all follow a very similar structure. In fact, if you really just looked at the skeletons of all the docs I've made, almost all of them they do follow a pattern.
Do you sit ahead of time and contrive how the thing is going to unfold, even though you don't have footage yet?
You have to. Oh, you absolutely have to. Because partly you still, some of these situations, even if somebody is approaching me, we still have to go then pitch it. Like if a producer approaches me and said, I have an idea, would you be interested in directing it? It might take even a month of talking with that person. And I finally might go, and a lot of times I say no. I mean, I honestly will go like, no, it doesn't quite, it's not, I'm sorry, but if it's something I kind of get hooked on, then we have to go pitch it. And my point is that by pitching, you have to kind of understand what a film is really about.
Hmm.
Because docs are always, they're about something on the surface, and then they're really about something else.
Sure.
Of course, so are narrative films. It's like,
Text and subtext.
exactly. Like, what's this film about? Oh, it's about the Seattle music scene. Oh, so it's a music film. Yeah, but it's really about how pop culture works and cycles of pop culture and exploitation and about how the world discovers something that's really authentic. It gets exploited and then it moves on in its own way. And, that's what it's sociology, actually.
Is that the same thing in the Defiant Ones?
Well, I didn't direct that, and that, I edited and produced that, but you know what? Yes, yes. Each and every episode that did follow a certain pattern. The pattern is usually, I won't get too lost in this. I'm trying to put it in one sentence. The pattern is a hook to get you interested, to let everybody know who's watching this, like this is big, or this is interesting, or this is something you don't know about. Stay tuned. And then it's always the golden era, the heyday, the good, the up. And then the middle part of a film, call it act two or whatever you want, is usually when, uh-oh, things are getting weird. Something changed. Something is messed up about that. Something's bad. Like, like a young artist who was just everything suddenly is making money and their career starts to get weird,
Hmm.
and it's a threat and it changes all sorts of their moral code, and it changes this or that. I mean, that's a very common thing with most rock and roll films.
So you still need, like a narrative structure, you still need the ups and downs. It can't just be a straight line, a flat line story that just follows one boring thing after
No,
another. It has to have some kind of there's a conflict, and there's conflict in all docs, I assume, the ones that you make.
if it doesn't have conflict, it's not drama. If it's not drama, it's not a good doc. Documentaries have the ability to be as dramatic films, and too many docs, I mean, the ones I'm critical of, are like just sort of they're like you said, sort of flat lines, where it's, if you could take a scene from minute 17 and swap it with a scene from minute 40 and it would make no difference. And that to me is the sign of, not to sound so critical, but like a bad structure.
Hmm.
It has to rise. It has to have surprises. It has to have this idea of a subject, whether it's an individual or a community or a business or a band, or I don't care what it is, that they're going through something that twists and turns and changes. I mean, there's no such thing as good storytelling if your basic subject doesn't change and grow or have challenges, even if it's a tragedy or some's either got to go up or down, and if it's going up, it's got to go down, even within a 10-minute period. Like if you're kind of going up, it's really wonderful to surprise the audience with, and then this happened.
Hmm.
Like, oh, it's so great. He won the Grammy. Like in the Defiant Ones, there were so many ups for Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre. I mean, they won hundreds of Grammys or whatever. Okay. They won lots and lots of Grammys. I don't know about hundreds. And just so many stories of just high, high, high success. So many stories of challenges and tragedies and difficulties and problems with the law or the business or Napster or whatever. I mean, just, divorces are like every single time we went up, we kind of realized, oh, we can pull the rug out again. Boom. And we would do it as editors. And it was true. I mean, they were true stories. And it was just a blessing of what's the expression? It was an embarrassment of riches because they had so much in their stories. It was a very dynamic,
Well, those are two gigantic lives.
yeah, larger than life and honest. And honest. Alan Hughes is the director, and he's a fantastic director because he made sure that they wouldn't do that project unless they could bear all. And they really, really did. They were very honest. And Alan was able to take them there. And I've often asked that of my own subjects because nobody really likes a tribute. Tributes are for memorials when someone's passed away. And tributes are for if you really just want to honor something amazing and just, hey, make a really nice doc and full on tribute. Give this person credit.
So, how do you go about getting a celebrity, a famous person, a powerful person in an industry? How do you get them to open up like that? Is there a technique, a methodology, or is it just have to play it by ear?
Well, first of all, you just ask them questions in your interview that go there and see how they go. But I know what Alan did for the Defiant Ones is he really was like, you guys, you got to bear all. And he knew the things they didn't want to talk about. And he actually just up front was like, you're going to have to talk about this. And they'd be like, oh, Alan. But so he prepped them for it. And then he would not do it in the first interview or the second or the third. I mean, he did like 8 interviews with each of them. And in my case, it's not really any different. I mean, I did a film about illegal underground graffiti. Underground meaning just, I mean, but it's called Infamy, and it came out in 2006, and I'm very proud of the film. And it really was a whole pull no punches, very honest look at real graffiti. Real graffiti meaning not like the pretty mural you see on a college campus. I mean, like the taggers, like the hardcore, true, representing a crew, taggers and graffiti writers, like but really, really good ones who are up all over their city or around the country. And I had to tell them, and my partner, my producing partner, who knew them, just had to tell them, like, you guys can't wear masks, and we're going to ask you everything. We're going to ask you everything.
Wow.
And I mean, we're not going to ask you stuff that'll land you in jail, but we're going to ask you everything.
Did that make it unsafe for you?
A little, but it made it unsafe for them. It was a big step for them to agree not to have masks, way pre-COVID, I might add. But I mean, just masks, so they could just see their eyes. They really wanted to do that. I was like, no. In fact, we went further, and I asked them if they would allow me to interview their moms or dads. It ended up being moms in most cases. And they didn't want to do that either. But it was like, no, I really want an honest portrayal of your life. Like there was almost became a criteria for who we could interview. And we did 6 graffiti writers, and it's very powerful. It really, really worked.
You said that you do actually sit down ahead of production and determine which direction you're going to go and who you're going to talk to and what you're going to attempt to get. How often does it happen that once you're in the middle of it, you discover something different out entirely and go in a different direction?
In the best scenarios.
In the best scenario.
Because that's the beauty of documentary filmmaking. You have a plan, you have a roadmap, but then just like going off-roading or something or hiking wild, like if you don't have a good map, you can't go off trail.
Mm-hmm.
That's my metaphor. And it really works because it's true. If you don't have a map, you're just lost. But if you have a map, if you have a really clear idea of what you want out of the film, not every detail, but a good outline, then it allows you to take these crazy curveballs. I made a film called Surfwise in 2007 about the Paskowitz family, this legendary surfing family with this amazing, strong, vigilant patriarch and matriarch, Dorian and Juliet Paskowitz. Well, I thought it was going to be almost like just a happy, fun surf, like, oh yeah, they live naturally on the beaches. They never went to school. This is a perfect example of kind of like an like what happens if you raise your kids like Aboriginal, like wolves or something. And that was his dream. And they ate super healthy and they never went to school and they surfed every day. I thought I was portraying Nirvana, heaven on earth. Like really. Within like 2 or 3 days, the interviews just went south in a good way. I mean, in a way of like, oh no, like, no, there's all this other stuff going on in this family. And it sounds so mercenary, but it was exciting. It was like, oh, this story is filled with paradox, which are the best stories.
Mhm.
The ones that are like, it's this and this. They lived the greatest lifestyle in the world, and it was deeply troubled. And there were serious problems, and they were honest about it. Very honest. So that wasn't something that I had to ask them in advance. Will you be honest about your family? They just were.
Mhm.
And it just came out. It just came out with they have 9 kids. All 9 kids to a name were profoundly honest. And I just absolutely loved the experience. I mean, it was a hard film to make for a lot of different reasons, but they were just an amazing family. I love them to this day. And yeah, they had problems like all families.
In the history of the world, has there ever been a family that was perfect?
That's right. Exactly. So when I approach any character, any subject, I don't care who it is. I don't care if they're like, a billionaire who just won every award in business, or I don't care who it is, like a major athlete who's successful all the time, seemingly so. The first place I want to go, or the third place I want to go in that interview is like, so what's hard? What are the days you don't want to get out of bed? What do you hate about this job, even though it seems to everyone else like the perfect job? Because, there's, this idea that Howard Suber talks about in The Power of Film is this idea that all great characters are trapped and that all of us are trapped. As a documentary filmmaker, I really believe that's true. I mean, I really believe that there is that sort of, I call it the private hell. Everybody has a private hell. And it doesn't mean you need to expose all that. If I'm interviewing somebody about sports, I don't have to talk about their divorce 10 years ago. You know what I mean? It's not about gotcha. It's not about like, I'm not into prurient, like, oh, wow, I get to hear about their sex life or something. I don't give a damn about any of that stuff. It's more, I want to know how they do what they do. It's kind of like that's what you do on StoryBeat.
That's what we're doing here. It's true that we're all trapped in our own minds, in our own bodies. We can't be someone else. We can't be
Mhm.
somewhere where we aren't, except in our
Mhm.
imaginations, perhaps. But we are all stuck within. And this is a wonderful segue into the power of film, which I think we should talk a little bit about. First of all, explain to the listeners, if they don't know what the power of film is, either the book or the movie, or the documentary series, what is it about?
The Power of Film is a 6-part, it's actually a documentary series because we filmed a legendary professor named Howard Suber, who was a PhD who taught for literally 53 years at UCLA, some of those later years as a emeritus professor. Just legendary. And he taught film structure. And he taught about how films work. And he did it in a way that he only studied popular and memorable films.
Hmm.
He had plenty of classes on the French New Wave and many other amazing genres in film. So it wasn't that he was anti that. But he really always wanted to figure out the most popular and memorable. He didn't care about box office success. It had to be both popular and memorable films
And mostly American films.
in American films. And he studied them in depth and watched them numerous times and taught many classes on them. And his class became kind of sort of this great secret around UCLA of like, oh, one thing before you graduate, you better take Howard's class
Hmm.
because it taught you about all these very deeply human motivations and things that are embodied in all the great films. Like he would take The Godfather, and which is maybe one of his, most famous courses. He would unpack The Godfather, and you just realize again and again and again all the different very human themes that we can all relate to, even if we're not Italian, even if we're not, have nothing to do with gangsters, even if we have nothing to do with anything that's even remotely like that story. There are so many things in that story that we can relate to. And he's a very good teacher at making that come home. Like, here's why Shawshank Redemption works. Here's why Thelma and Louise works. Here's why even more recent films, Get Out, is so powerful. It's like he really sees it, and he analyzes films. And to answer your question in shorter terms, the series basically takes 50 years of teaching and it kind of condenses it into six kind of master lectures, but it's not a master class either. And it's not really just academic. It's all sort of all the things it's not is hard to explain because it's basically a professor looking straight into the lens and teaching in his wonderfully humble and humorous way. And then hundreds and hundreds of film clips that illustrate exactly what he's talking about.
Because he's a pattern recognitionist and he looks for the patterns in all these hundreds of movies as to why it is that these work and others won't work. And he comes up with all of those principles and elements of storytelling that are intrinsic in all of it that have been around for thousands of years since the Greeks and beyond. And he's the one, Howard Suber's the single individual who figured out what all those principles and elements are that make movies and plays and books, frankly, memorable and popular. And that's what I found extraordinary about his class and super extraordinary about the series. Well, the book, he's got a book called The Power of Film, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's like an encyclopedia of film elements and principles.
Right, like if you want to read about destiny, go to chapter D.
And each one of those chapters are only a page or two, sometimes 2.5 pages, mostly one page,
Mm-hmm.
and lots of examples of how this, that you can see it. And that's what you did so brilliantly in this series is you used all of those clips to show exactly what he's talking about. It becomes obvious on the screen in front of you.
Yeah, it's a really I'm always trying to explain to people what it's like, and they say, "Oh, so it's like an academic thing. Oh, it's like a history." No, not at
No,
all. Like he
no.
doesn't talk about the history of film. He doesn't talk about actors so much. He'll name them, but like it's just it's really just this guy, Howard Suber, and he sort of has a magical way of lulling you into it. I think people in the first few minutes are going, "Really?" And then slowly they're kind of hooked.
It's easy to get hooked.
And then it just kind of gets better and better, and it gets deeper and deeper. It gets very deep. And you start realizing, oh my God, he's talking about my life.
Hmm.
He's talking about betrayal. He's talking about romance in a way that I understand. He's talking about hurt. He's talking about all these different things that are in my life, or
And that's what's reflected in all of these movies. These movies are about people and their problems and their hurt and their successes and all the rest of it. And he's sitting there and saying, here is why you're so into this because of this, and this.
yeah,
This element, that element,
yeah,
this element. So you just back up and you go, wow, that's really why I like these movies, why I'm a movie aficionado. And frankly, how many people are there on planet Earth that are movie buffs? Literally tens, if not hundreds of millions
I know.
of movie buffs.
It's true.
Why does it work? He explains it. There's no other series that I can think of at all that's even vaguely like The Power of Film. Would you agree?
I totally agree. And it's been fun to have it get out there because this was a completely handmade independent film.
Hmm.
And it just not a film, a series. And actually even that I don't think has ever really happened. I don't know that there's many 6-part series of anything that are like independently made. And since Howard, this took like 8 years to make. And it's sort of been a slow thing where we were just like, no, I don't think we'll get distribution. I don't think anybody's going to understand this. We love it, and we love Howard, and we love these clips, and this is really cool. So we're just gonna, if we have to, we're just gonna put it up on YouTube, or we'll just get it out there. We'll just send it to everybody, you know.
You made it out of love.
Well, kind of. I mean, it was absolutely a labor of love because Howard was my mentor and he was Laura Gabbard. I really got to give credit to Laura Gabbard. She was my partner throughout the whole thing, producing partner. And, you know, we both just made it. We just decided a long time ago that we really wanted to see this through. And I'm really happy we did because now it's starting to get this little buzz from screenwriters and directors and other people going, oh, wow.
Where can people find it? They can find it on Max. Yes.
That's right. Well, it's on Max now. It started out, it premiered on Turner Classic Movies, and it still will be on TCM again. But they have a thing called the TCM Hub on Max, so it's absolutely viewable on Max. And we're just thrilled that it's out there. And Howard is 86 and just a great guy. And we're just really happy that we got to kind of help him realize this dream.
I'm very happy that you did it, and I think the world should be very happy that you did it, especially anybody trying to make movies and make them better. So let's talk about the series. What were the biggest hurdles aside from the massive amount of time it took? What were the big hurdles you had to overcome?
I think the hardest thing in the beginning was how on Howard's end, really. He worked with another TA of his. Laura and I were both TAs of his at different eras at UCLA. It's another guy named Joey Sierra. And then we brought on an editor, Ava Kamborian, and another guy, Philip Owens, who for the first 4 years, they kind of traded off doing edits. And then I worked mostly on it for the last year and a half. Long story short, the hardest thing was trying to get all of his teachings compressed into
Hmm.
6 episodes because we knew they couldn't go
Really?
on and on and on for like 2 hours. I mean, they had to be like 40 minutes. Like that's a decent time. They're about 40 minutes each, and that's a good time for it. That's a good length. So that was really hard. And that was on Howard and Joey. And I mean, of course, we were all involved in those discussions, but that was really challenging. And then I think the other challenging thing was just working for Howard because in the end, he's kind of still my professor. So we'd be editing, whether it was Philip editing or me or Avo, it didn't matter. But like we'd be editing and we would, you know, not always, we would show him like, okay, here's some progress. And he would watch and go like, no, you sort of missed the point of that lecture. Like you missed the, you know, you're like, oh my God, am I going to get a B minus on this one? You know, like, so there was that whole dynamic of wanting Howard to like it, you know. And I think really the most frustrating thing, honestly, was that it just took a long, long time. And I felt, you know, both Laura and I felt really, frankly, kind of guilty that it was taking so long because it just took a long time to figure out. It was like a puzzle. It took a long, long time to figure out.
Oh, I don't know how it wasn't a puzzle. How many clips are there all told in all six combined?
There's a lot. I mean, I can't count the number of clips. Let's just say there's well over, you know, there's something like a couple hundred movies presented in short, you know, like in other words, like touched upon. It doesn't mean he's discussing.
That alone must have taken forever to figure out which clips to use,
Yeah, it did.
whether it works or not.
Yeah, it was like writing a book. And you know, it's just by the way, I my story about him still being my prof, he was just lovely. He was just completely supportive. And I think he realized we're just doing this for no pay and like just wanting to get this done. And, you know, he was couldn't have been more supportive, you know, even up into the seventh or eighth year. He was just like, no, because as we got closer, we kept saying, Howard, we're going to finish this thing. We really are. We're getting closer. Episode 1 was finished. Okay, now we're going to finish episode 2. You know, just kept going. It was the slow reveal of different episodes and getting his approval and doing the tweaks on those. You know, that was the whole last year and a half at least.
So, how did you decide how to break them into the six pieces or components?
Honestly, that really, to some degree, that fit Howard's original. We spent 6 days on the soundstage. We went on the soundstage and we set up a camera to look right at Howard, directly at him,
Hmm.
kind of like Zoom, if you're looking straight into the Zoom camera. And there were 6 days. And he did break that up into thematic lectures. So, for example, I think it might be true. Episode 4 is called Heroes and Villains, and I think it might be true that day 4 was Heroes and Villains. It may not have been called that, but it was about heroes and villains. And, I know that day 6 on his last big series of lectures was about Wizard of Oz and about goodbyes and about all these, like, it was very emotional. I really remember that. I remember actually getting emotional when we were filming on his last, couple hours in that soundstage, because he was really going deep on. I wish we could, I wish the episodes could have been an hour and a half long, not for the making of it, but just in real life. I wish they were, because he really got much deeper on some of these.
Oh, you definitely want more at the end of each episode. It's not like you get to the end and think, thank goodness that's over. No, no, you want more and more and more because it's so fascinating and it draws you so deeply in. So each episode, which I also really loved, you end each episode with a nice sort of tweak at the end. It's you leave us wanting more at the very end with the way that you end the episodes. Was that by design or did you find that in post?
That really was in post, actually, just because you want to always, especially in a series, you always want to hook somebody to watch the next episode. So we're always looking for hooks or a lead into the next concept. I think a couple episodes he ends like, well, in our next episode we'll talk about this. But yeah, you want to leave people thinking even deeper about what was just said so that they go away going, huh, I wonder.
It feels like a button at the end of it's a commercial break is coming. So here's the button and it wants you to wait for the next thing to come. And so I think that the way that you did that was superb.
Well, I really like it when Howard talks about you. He's looking into the camera. He's talking about you, the viewer. It's very, it really kind of gets to you if you're into the series and you're watching it, because there are 3 or 4 times during each episode, he'll say, like at the end of episode 5, he's talking about intermediaries. And he's talking about how we all are intermediaries in our lives in different ways. And great heroes are always intermediaries. It's almost a defining quality of a great hero, which is certainly something I never had thought about, but they're able to go into different worlds. I mean, everybody from Luke Skywalker to you name it, like just you could go right down the line and name all the kind of great heroes. And it's really interesting. And he ends that episode by just saying, and what about you? I think it's the end of episode 3, forgive me. And he ends it, he's just saying like, ask yourself, how are you an intermediary? And I like that ending, because it makes people kind of, the episode ends and they're probably going like, okay, I guess I am between my mom and my dad, or I guess I am between my workplace and this other thing, or at my workplace, I'm an intermediary or whatever.
Well, I think that that's the way that it is in life most of the time. And so, yes, that's absolutely right. That we are all in between various things. We all put on different sort of personality hats. When we deal with the clerk in the post office, you deal with that person differently than you deal with your sibling or with your parents. You deal with everybody a little bit differently. So yeah, we're all intermediaries in this life. I think that that's what's so special about it. But again, it's the way that you guys put it together with all those clips to say, oh, I recognize all of this in all of these movies. And truthfully, you could have done another 6 parts, really, if you'd wanted to, if you'd had another 8 years.
Well, Howard would love to.
I'm sure he would.
He's going through his notes right now. We just talked about this last week. He said, I'm going through my notes and I'm looking for stuff that we either left on the editing room floor or that was chapters in my book that we never even touched on. And I was like, knock yourself out. And I love that idea. And let's talk about it next week. No, that sounds so mean, like I'm putting the guy off. It would be hard to do that because I think it almost took it all out of us, all of us, even Howard, just to get it done.
I think it is what it is. I don't think there should be another part, especially the fact that Howard, I guess he's spent his life doing this. And I think that he's really killed himself to make this as good as he can make it. And I think that it's fantastic and I wouldn't change a thing. And I think it's just right. And it makes you want to go read the book, which gives you even more detail. So I think that that's what's great about it. It gives you an opportunity to find even more quite easily.
Yeah.
We've been talking for a little bit more than an hour with the absolutely phenomenal documentarian Doug Prey, and we're going to wind the show down a little bit right now. And you've told us all of these various experiences of yours, but I wonder if you can share with us an experience that you've been through in all of your years that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or maybe just plain funny?
Well, I'll say this. I was talking about my very first feature film, which took 4.5 years to make and nearly killed me and was total paying your dues kind of project. But I also was so honored to be able to tell the story of the Seattle music scene and couldn't have done it without so many people. But it took all that time. And I was the editor in the end. There was another great editor who was working with me at the beginning. But anyway, and I'm really into sound design. I'm really like, to me, sound is the secret weapon of documentaries. And the opening of Hype, this rock is a big rock and roll film, and we had a massive 5.1 sound mix. I mean, massive. I mean, the whole goal was like we wanted when the big bands played, your shirt to flutter. Like if you're sitting, that was our goal. And spent a lot of time and had some brilliant sound mixers who, by the way, have gone on to many Academy Awards, many more than I've ever gotten, which is zero. The sound mixers of that film. So this is a big thing, and it's a documentary, but big sound. And it's the world premiere of my very first feature at Sundance in a packed theater, 700 seats, and I am freaking out, nervous, because even though people wonder why would he be nervous about just playing a film? They're just going to hit play, because you just are. It's worse than stage fright for me. It's a deep panic. It's like, oh my God. And so here we go. The room goes dark. I see the first image. I'm going, here we go, here we go, here we go. I'm waiting for the 5-1 sound to just kick in and just blow everybody away with this intensive montage of sounds and cacophony and music. And it's dead silent. And I'm sitting there somewhere in the middle of the audience or whatever, near the aisle, I guess. And like, it's just silent. And it's still silent. 5 seconds, 6 seconds, 7, 10. Like 15 seconds in, I'm going, oh my God, there's no sound. Holy shit. And I like bound out of my seat and I run up, like the audience is like dead silent. And like there's this like silent movie playing and they don't know what the hell it is. It's like just images and it's like a montage. I run up the audience, like all the way up the aisle. I go out in the hallway, I'm pounding on the projectionist, doing, this is a rock movie. We need sound. We need sound now. And they can't like rewind. You can't rewind a projector. And they turned it on. And I don't want to give grief to them because first of all, it's 30 years ago or whatever, 25 years ago. And and I was so honored to be at Sundance. I would never, ever give them grief because it really, really was such a big deal to have a premiere there. And they got the sound going. And, I don't know, it was like a minute. And so everybody who saw that world premiere had no idea what we'd spent like months on. And so it's just one of those stories of like, you know what? But we moved on. We had other screenings. It all worked out. It's just kind of like, anyway, that's more of a horror story, but like,
You did finally see it with the opening and the right sound, yes?
no.
In other screenings, you saw it.
Oh, and other screenings. Oh, absolutely. No, it was fine for the rest. I had a fantastic festival. It was a great experience. I owe my career practically to Sundance because they accepted that film and it kind of helped kick off my career. And I mean, I haven't been there for many years since, but it was just a great experience. But that was one kind of just crazy moment.
Well, that's terrifying, actually, is what it is.
Yeah. The other thing is really just an image of, I made a movie called Big Rig that's about truck drivers, about independent long haul truck drivers.
Okay.
And I don't know. I mean, do you have another minute? I'll keep this short.
Of course.
This is really just an image of being a documentary filmmaker because you're always in strange lands as a documentarian. You're kind of often like the fish out of water going, what am I doing here? Why am I here at 4 a.m? Or why am I here with these people in this living room? Or why? And one of the strangest things was making this film Big Rig, which was actually produced by Brad Blondheim, who produced my second film, Scratch. And so it was me and Brad, and we would just go fishing, so to speak, for interviews in truck stop parking lots.
Really?
All across the country. We went to every single state. We traveled. It was like a 40,000-mile journey. We did dozens of interviews. It was an incredible experience, but it was all about long haul independent truck drivers. And the only way to get interviews, like to cast for them, so to speak, was like to kind of go up to trucks and knock on the windows or say like meet a trucker. You might like their truck, or you might say, "Hey, what are you hauling?" And like, "Hey, and what's that camera for?" "Oh, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm doing a documentary about truck drivers." The problem is you're not allowed to film at truck stops at all. Like you certainly weren't in 2006. You definitely aren't today. But in 2006, it was already getting kind of more corporatized and more laws. And it was like the days of the old, like friendly little neighborhood cafe truck stop, that's a thing of the past. They exist, but it's really a thing of the past. And long story short, it's just the image of there's no solicitation, no prostitution, no drug, no selling drugs, and definitely no documentary filmmakers. And we literally got chased out by like first people with broomsticks, like get off our parking lot. And I was like, oh my God, they're literally chasing us and like running me and Brad, like jumping into the van and like hauling off. And there was like a cop and like, it was just like, oh my God, we're getting busted for trying to make a documentary film. But it was just like the whole it was just like for days we just kept going like, okay, well at least we were like we weren't prostitutes, we weren't drug dealers, but God, we were definitely documentarians. And that was like a
What would they have arrested you for? Would have been what? Trespass?
solicitation, soliciting. I laugh about it because it was like there was nothing worse than what we were doing. Like, it's the evidence of everything else going on.
How did you resolve it? How did you eventually get the interviews?
In that case, the trucker met us. I had been in conversation with a really great trucker, and he was like, "You guys better get the hell out of here." And he was like, but he met us, and it actually became one of the best interviews of the whole movie. It was this guy and his wife Loretta, and it was just fantastic. I interviewed them from Memphis all the way to Cincinnati, and it was just really, really fantastic. Both I interviewed both of them. One he was in his truck, she was in it. They were tandem. They were like, driving together.
Did they let you sit in the truck with them while they were driving?
Oh yeah, the whole movie. If you watch the movie, it's as if you're hitchhiking coast to coast, and you get in one truck and you get this really deep story, and then you get in another one, you get a totally different deep story, and there is an arc. There is a structure. It starts out kind of like happy-go-lucky, like, oh, trucking's awesome. And it gets dark fast because it
Mm.
really was about it ended up, we thought it would just be a huge celebration of how cool trucking is. Those old trucking movies from the 60s and 70s,
Yes.
like whatever. And we thought it would be more like that spirit.
Convoy.
Yeah, convoy and trucking songs and CB radios and
Smokey and the Bandit.
Smokey and the Bandit. And yeah, and honestly, very, very quickly, we realized we were making a portrait of America, and it was not a happy portrait. And these guys were hurting, and they really did not like all the regulations or the gas prices. They were getting screwed. And it really opened my mind to what later became a huge population in our country who is pissed off and really like a lot, I won't go into the politics, but the very obvious politics we've seen in the last 5, 6 years, kind of that the seeds of that are throughout this film, talking to these truckers because they were legitimately getting screwed. There were regulations that seemed unfair. They were mistreated on the highways by us four-wheelers. You just live with them and we lived with them for months. And it was really, really eye-opening. It's a pretty dark film. It's a positive film, but it's dark in the sense that I don't make political films, but it sort of became political without trying.
Well, that's very interesting. I would love to check that out one of these days. So, last question for you today, Doug. You've already given us a huge amount of information to chew on and advice throughout this whole show, but I'm wondering if you have a single solid piece of advice or a tip that you like to give those that are starting out in the business, or maybe they're in a little bit and trying to get to that next level.
I think it's really simple. I think the people who have done okay in this business are people who are persistent, who just kind of don't quite give up despite the desperate struggles. I mean, I've never had a film that didn't have a very dark moment where I really wanted out and I hated the subject, I hated the film, I hated my edit, I hated the idea, I wanted out. I mean that seriously, because these projects take a year or two, three, four sometimes. Every film I've ever made, there's been a moment when I was like, oh my God, why am I doing this? This is wrong. I don't know what I'm doing. This is wrong. This is a bad idea, you know. And somehow, out of that kind of depth of despair, which I think is unfortunately kind of a part of the creative process, somehow the idea that, well, just keep going. I don't know, just keep going. We'll figure it out. Maybe I'll take a little break. Maybe I'll figure it out tomorrow. Maybe what that producer said was right. Maybe what that other friend of mine said was right. You know, starting to open my mind to listening to some outside advice, you know, because we get defensive and we get just sort of like lost in our ideas. And so somehow this idea of just persistence, of just not really ever giving up, I really think is one of the things I did. I just kind of never quite gave up, even though I wanted to. I definitely wanted to.
I think that that's true of most art,
Yeah.
is that most art and artists, you get in the middle of whatever it is you're doing and you're not sure it's going to work because you don't really have the proper feedback yet. And it's really hard
Yeah.
to keep going. But yes, I think you're right. The real true professionals and the real true artists, they don't give up. They are persistent. I think that's really, truly wise advice. And if you do give up, then you'll never know whether it'll succeed or not.
I would add one more part to that, and I think kind of not taking yourself too seriously. Because to they have the ability to self-reflect and say, oh, this really is bad, or gee, this is ridiculous. Let's just laugh this off and move on. You know, because there's many tragedies in every production and things like that. I think that's also really helpful. I think that people who take it just way too seriously and like, I'm this and I'm that, and some of those people become very successful, but I don't think they're very healthy.
I agree with you. I think that it's still called show business. It's not exactly called the dirge, you know. You should be having fun. If you're not having fun, there might be a problem there.
Yeah, totally.
Doug Prey, this has been so much fun for me today, and we could carry on for hours more. But I can't thank you enough for your time, your energy, and your wisdom, and especially for doing The Power of Film. I thank you for being on the show today, and I'm very grateful to you.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great Story Beat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.